Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder when I head out for a walk and deliver an episode to you while I stroll around. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good morning, listeners. It is a lovely day here in suburban Chicago. It's the second part of my walk after heading up to the library. I just finished recording the episode about fancy bits. Well, I've been playing a lot of games lately, and I think it's time for you to hear about some more. That's right, it's another shooting from the hip triple shot. Today I'll be talking about 3 games that I have played for the first time recently. One of these was a couple weeks ago at the end of my trip to Portland, and the other 2 are more recent. So the first one, this is the only game, it's the only game that I bought on my trip to Portland that we played in Portland. And this is the Freedom and Freeze game, Fast Forward Flee. I have to admit, that's F-L-E-E, like run away, not F-L-E-A, like the biting insect or the bassist for Red Hot Chili Peppers. I've been intrigued by the Freedom and Freeze Fast Forward series since I first heard about it. I think it came out in 2018, I want to say, with a number of games that had the same basic premise. They were a one-word title. Starts with F usually, like Fortress, I know was another one of them, and Flee was one. And the premise of these games is that you can just take them out of the box and start playing. That they come as a sealed deck of cards, and the first few cards at the top of the deck tell you what to do. They tell you how to play the game, they tell you how to set up, and then they tell you how to play the game as you draw the cards. It's a pretty neat concept, and I think moving toward the notion of video games where you learn to play the games by just opening up the game and starting to play. I think it's worth exploring that as a teaching tool to go with games. I'm not sure how much I like the idea that the game itself is limited to cards that you can fit in the stack so that you can use it as a teaching tool, but as an experience, it was pretty cool. So the game we got was Flee, which is Alice in Wonderland themed, and the idea is that there is a creature coming after you, and the goal is to play cards such that the player whose turn it is does not have the monster in their hand. If the player whose turn it is, or monster in front of them, I guess. If the player whose turn it is has the monster in front of them, the group loses. That's it. That's the whole game. The way the game works is that you each get a starting set of cards. One person has the monster. Usually it's the last person in the 4 around the table. And then you take turns drawing a card and playing a card. And the cards that you play, or you play a card and then you draw. And the cards that you play allow you to do something to manipulate the state of the table. They allow you to switch who's doing what. They allow you to move things around. And as the game goes along, people will get more and more cards, and you'll get more flexibility about how you handle what's going on with the monster. But basically there's this monster on the table, and it's in front of one player. And all you can do is move it to another player. You can't ever get rid of it. And so you just go around the table taking turns, moving the monster around, affecting all sorts of things about the way the game plays to try to never have it be somebody's turn while they have the monster. My wife and I played 2 games of this. I think we got to the stage 3 and then we lost. We got past stage 1. I think on our first game we lost before stage 1, so then you completely reset. In our second game we got to the beginning of stage 3 and then we lost. So then you reset the game. Once you've gotten past stage 1, you never go back all the way to stage 1. I mean, you can, but you don't have to. From then on, you start at stage 2. Stage 1 is the introductory setup and beginning to play mode. As a game, it feels more like an experiment than a fully formed game. It's very light, but the premise was really neat. I like the way that the game plays. The actual movement of the cards around the table is pretty interesting. And more importantly, as an experiment, there's a lot to learn from it. I'm not sure how much play it's going to get. Maybe something where we play through it a few times, and once we've gotten through it all the way, we'll be done with it. And then I'll pass it on to Toggle probably. So that's Fast Forward Flee from Freedom and Freeze, published in English from Stronghold Games. All right, the next game I want to talk about is Snowtails. Snowtails is a game that has long been enjoyed by families as a light race game with relatively simple mechanisms and an excellent theme of a dog sled race. In Snowtails, you have a little image of a dog sled ahead of you, and you have these number tiles or number cards that allow you to set the speed that your dogs are running. Now you have 3 tiles that you can play. You have the tiles that go on either side of your sled, which indicate how fast the dog is going. And then you have a tile that goes on the back of your sled, which indicates how hard you're pushing on the brake. Because one thing about dog sled racing is that you're usually trying to slow the dogs down by standing on the brake, which digs into the snow. So the way the game works is that you, on your turn, you can play 1 or 2 cards. The 2 cards, if you're going to play 2 cards, they have to be the same value. You're changing the speed of the dog sled that you're running. The way you do that is that you are playing these cards down, and the numbers will be between 1 and 5, and they go on either side of your sled, and add those numbers together, and that's where you get your speed. So for instance, if you're going a 4 and a 4, you're going 8. You're also balanced, so I think you can go 1 more or 1 fewer than that. If you're going, if you have a 3 and a 4, then you're going 7. But you're also pulling harder on one side of the sled, which means the sled is going to move in that direction 1 space. I think I might have that backwards. But the track board is a series of squares with squares next to them and kind of squares in front of them. And the idea is that as you go along, you're sliding you're bringing your sled around the board with the goal of navigating the curves and avoiding crashing your sled. The speed that you move is the combination of the 2 dog cards minus the brake. So if you have 7 on your dog cards and your brake is at 3, you might be going 4 spaces that turn. And then your drift from side to side is determined by the difference between the 2 numbers. The higher the difference, the bigger the drift you go from side to side. If you crash your sled into the side of the trail or you hit another sledder, then you take damage, which is a card that goes in your hand and makes it harder to change the speed of your sled, because now you have this damage card in your hand instead of sled cards. The game, I played 2-player with my friend Paul. The game took about 20 minutes to play, another 10 to explain maybe at the beginning, and was definitely in the realm of nice fantasy race, or nice family race game. The theme is lovely, the art is lovely, it's fun to mush a pack of dogs in the game. So all in all, an excellent fit for family dog sledding race game genre. Not probably a game I would go out and buy, but certainly a game I'm happy to have in my orbit, and I know a game my son will enjoy, and everybody can have a good time playing it even if it's not their favorite. That's Snowtails, designed by Gordon and Fraser Lamont and published by Frigor Games, Asmodee, and Renegade Games Studios. I'm not sure who published the edition that I got to play. Probably Renegade. The third game that I want to mention is one that I was a little hesitant about because I like the theme so much, but I have such fondness for a different game with the same theme that I was worried this game would not be delightful. And this is Vampire the Masquerade Vendetta. So as you know, Vampire the Eternal Struggle is one of my favorite games. It's a collectible card game from the early 2000s that I played for a while and I thought was wonderful. I have a couple thousand cards in my basement, would enjoy playing again sometime. Well, Vampire the Masquerade Vendetta is set in the same World of Darkness role-playing setting where you have a masquerade, a secret society of vampires who control the world. They have their own set of rules and royalty called princes who are in charge of big regions, and they have clans of different types of vampires, and they have traditions and rules and so on. Well, in the game, it takes place in the Chicago region, principality, I guess, and you are vampires fighting with other vampires to be in charge of the city. And the way that works is that the game has a series of battles, and each round you're going to play cards into some of the battles, and you play all but one of your cards each round, so you're holding one back, and you're doing that to interact with other players in a variety of ways. The game plays relatively simply. You start with, I think, 3 cards, and we played a 5-player game, and your 3 cards that you have, you're going to play to these different locations, and then you can either stay and you commit some of your power to add to your value there, and then you either stay or you leave. What makes the game really interesting is the element of sort of bluffing and surprise, because when you play a card, you can spend some of your power to play it face down. So now people don't know what you've played at that particular location. But because you have the same hand of cards throughout the game, each round you're drawing one card, and then you're playing cards until you're down to one. So every round you have more and more cards that you're playing, which means that over time they know which cards you have, and they have to kind of try to anticipate where you're going to play that card if you haven't played it face up. Or if you play it face up, it's a good kind of scare tactic, like, hey, I've got this powerful card, I played it here, you probably don't want to come here. And of course, if nobody comes there, then you win that fight automatically and you get bonus points and whatnot. The give and take of that secret, not secret, bluffing, not bluffing, cards that interact with each other was wonderful. On top of that, each player represents one of the different factions in the Vampire the Masquerade world, and each faction has a different thing they're good at. Some factions are old money, so they're good at like penalizing you. Some factions are political, so they're good at manipulating the table. Some factions are good at stealth or craziness. Like I was the Toreadors, who are sort of mad. They're blood mad. They're artistically mad, I guess I wasn't Toreador, I was Marvolio. But the whole thing they have is that they're constantly doing stuff and they don't know the outcome because they're adding cards from random places. Like one of the cards I got early on let me randomly add a card to the location, and then I have to discard back a card into my deck. So I'm like, my deck is filtering in a way that other people's isn't. So it's kind of crazy and weird. So different vampire clans have different attributes, and those attributes show up in those cards. I really liked this game. I had a very good time. It was very bluffy, very give and take. Most of us felt, I think, at least like we had a chance. One player was sort of lamenting that their cards weren't very good the whole time. I suspect they just were having trouble making them play right or play well. But overall, a really interesting game and well worth the time to try. I will say, if it affects it at all, I did win on a tiebreaker on the last turn, so that was kind of fun. But overall, a fascinating game, really interesting, easy to play. Took about an hour for 5 people, which is great. Maybe an hour and 10 with the teach. The only thing is lots of interacting rules and lots of phases and that sort of thing. So if you're somebody who has trouble with that kind of thing or have a player with that, it's not the simplest game. But boy, I had a good time. The art is lovely. The graphic design, this sort of pink neon thing, like nighttime pink neon, looked like the beginning of Blade Runner when Harrison Ford's walking around in the streets. That part's great. All in all, excellent game. Well worth the time to give it a try if you have the chance. I don't know if it would be a game I would enjoy playing in the long term, or a game I wouldn't want in my collection, given the people that I have that I play games with. It doesn't really fit our oeuvre. But overall, just a really great time. Well worth it. That's Vampire the Masquerade Vendetta. So what games have you been playing lately? I'd love to hear. You can let me know by heading over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269. You can reach out to me directly by emailing Brendan at Rattlebox Games, or you can send me a message on Board Game Geek. Wombat929 is my username there. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for joining me on my walk today. I hope your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.